Hey there! In this video I want to talk about gradient maps, a feature that is very much underrated in digital art. You might have never used it, but I will teach you a couple of ways how they can come in handy. Very handy, as a matter of fact. With them you can colorize black and white pictures, add glow effects, make certain painting processes easier, unify or change colors, edit artworks and photos, and so on. I am using Clip Studio Paint, but a lot of other graphics programs have gradient maps too, and they work pretty much the same. Okay, first of all, where can you find them? One option is to go to Edit, Tonal Correction, and there it is. This would apply the gradient map on the selected layer. However, I very much recommend making a correction layer instead, also called adjustment layer. Just right-click into the layers, go to correction layer, and there you can find it. You could also make a shortcut button here at the top like I did. First of all, a correction layer is applied in a non-destructive way. That means that all of your layers remain unchanged. At any point you can decide to change the correction layer, while doing it the direct way is permanent. Simply double-click on the left icon on the layer and the menu opens up again. Also, those correction layers aren't limited to just one layer. By default they are applied to all the layers below it, or just to the layer or folder you clipped it to. So you can see using those special kinds of layers is significantly more convenient. The only downside is that your list of layers gets a bit more cluttered. That's about it though. I recommend using them with all sorts of correction layers, not just gradient maps. Alright, let's finally talk about what those gradient maps actually do. This window might look a bit different if you're not using Clip Studio Paint, but the core features should be there. So you can see this gradient ramp here at the top. By default it goes from black to white, but it can have any sort of color gradients. What it does is, it replaces all the dark colors on the left and bright colors on the right with that new color gradient. On this gradient ramp you can click on these nodes and change the color by clicking on the color button under specified color. Pick whichever color you want, for example this blue, and click OK. Now all of the dark colors are replaced by that blue, according to that gradient. So the darkest colors are now the bluest. And I can also change the node on the right side and make it purple, for example. The brighter shades are now purple. You could also switch dark and bright around, it is completely up to you. Now I want to explain what the brightness of a color actually means, to avoid any kind of confusion. So, digital colors are based on hue, which is the general color, saturation, which determines how much color you get, zero saturation would be just gray, and value, which is the brightness of the color. And you might think that the gradient map sorts the colors after their digital value, but that is incorrect, and it would be a pretty terrible choice. Here is why. I have this gradient of colors. Across the whole spectrum, the only thing that varies is the hue. The saturation and value are always 100%. Okay, so you might expect that if you apply a gradient map that goes from black to white, then the colors end up as white. They all have 100% value after all. Well, let's see. Oh, it actually gives us all sorts of values. It ranges from almost white to almost black. So the gradient map doesn't sort colors by their value, but by their tone, the kind of brightness that we actually perceive. Blue, for example, looks much darker to us than yellow, even though the only difference is the hue. So if you imagine those colors mapped to the gradient ramp, then blue would be far to the left, while yellow is far to the right. Okay, back to explaining the gradient map menu. These nodes are movable, so you can fine adjust the gradients as width very easily that way. And you can add more nodes by clicking right below the ramp. Or remove them by dragging them out. Some programs also have midpoints that you can move. Clip Studio Paint has this mixing rate curve instead, to give you even more control. It influences the color gradient to the right side of the node you selected. That's why the rightmost node doesn't have the option for showing that curve. You can change this curve through those control points, which also can be added and removed like the nodes. So when it is just a straight curve, then the gradient evenly goes from the color of the node you selected, the left node, to the next one, the right node. If I drag this curve down, we get more from the left color. A larger part of the curve is on the left color output. And the opposite happens when we pull the curve up. You can make all sorts of crazy shapes. I'm not really trying to make it look good right now, but just show you how it works. The better looking stuff will be later in this video. Now, if you have the mixing curve deactivated, then it actually does not have a linear straight curve, but a slightly S-shaped curve, like this one by default. This kind of curve increases the contrast, which means that the left color is pushed more towards the middle, and the same goes for the right color. This also makes sure that the gradients look smoother. By the way, there is something else I want to point out. So I have this very simple black and white gradient. When I create a gradient map, even though the default goes from black to white, it actually changes the values. That is because of that smoothening curve. Here on the left node you can see it. And if you change it to a linear curve, then there is no difference to the original. Other programs might not have this mixing rate curve option, but the smoothness slider instead. So you would have to lower the smoothness to 0 to get a linear curve. Conveniently, there are also presets. You can try out a couple of those and see if you find one that you like or that you can build upon. There are also tons of presets available for download if you want to have more options. And of course you can make your own and reuse gradient maps that you made in the past. Another side note, gradient maps do not work with transparency. In the presets you can also find some that have transparency, but those don't work like you would expect. As you can see, it seems to treat the transparency as white, but without creating a gradient at all. It's kinda weird. That is why you also cannot choose transparency as the color for the nodes directly. Alright, now that we have a basic understanding of how they work, let's make use of them. There are lots of different ways to utilize them. One of the most straightforward ways is to colorize black and white pictures. I painted this snow leopard picture completely without any colors with the intention to colorize it later. The background and the snow leopard are on separate layers and folders, and I want to colorize them differently. The plan is to have warmer colors for the brighter areas on the snow leopard and cooler colors for the darker areas, and the background is supposed to have mainly warm colors. So let's make a gradient map for the snow leopard. If I want to clip it to the snow leopard folder at first, I need to hit OK, clip it, and then go back to the menu. First of all, the blacks should remain black, so I leave it at the left and add a couple of nodes in between. I choose a dark blue which isn't too saturated for the darker areas. Move towards a purple that is even less saturated, then an orange-red which is almost grey, and for the highlights a bright yellow. The absolute brightest strands of hair get white. So in total, those are some pretty tame colors. Snow leopard's fur doesn't have all that much color to begin with. Don't overdo it with the amount of color nodes, making it unnecessarily complicated, but having more than just 2 or 3 can give your picture more color variety. Now, I actually have the gradients already prepared and saved in my presets so that I can show you some proper results quickly. Usually it is a process of trying things out, choosing all sorts of colors, moving the nodes and curves around until you arrive at a satisfying result. Some basics about color theory come in handy though, like the fact that yellow and blue-purple are complementary colors, or the concept of color temperatures, combining warm colors like yellow with cooler colors like blue. This video isn't about color theory though, so let us continue. Now I want to colorize the background. The shades of it are much closer together, it doesn't have all that much contrast. As it is right now, it doesn't look too bad, but I want to get the colors a bit closer together with the snow leopard. Now, since we already learned how to add nodes and pick colors, I don't have to go through those processes over and over again. Instead, I pick the gradient from the presets. So here I have the one for the background. I chose warmer colors to coordinate the background with the highlight colors of the snow leopard. This gradient map also increases the contrast. Those wavy patterns kind of look like they are glowing now. Again, for comparing, this is with the gradient map turned off and turned on again. And now for the whole picture. Off and on. Quite a difference, even though I chose some tamer colors. Next up, I want to colorize the eye differently. I want it to have a light blue color, almost as if they are glowing. Let's use a gradient map to achieve that. Just make another gradient map layer, and at first let's just take some colors that really strongly contrast the painting. Hit OK and then click on the mask layer of the gradient map. Simply press delete and the mask layer hides everything. Now take some brush and paint in the eye. The contrasting color makes it easier to see if the eye is properly painted in, and only the eye. Now double click on the gradient map again and change the colors to what we actually want. Once again, I already have a preset for it. I want to keep the blacks and whites, but the mid colors should be the light blue. Make some corrections if necessary. And there you go. You can do this for several parts of the picture. For example, imagine you have a character with all sorts of clothes and armor and whatnot, but the entire picture was painted on one layer in black and white. You can use this mask layer technique to colorize those individual parts of the character, and the neat thing is that you can change those colors at any point very easily. It is a very different work process compared to painting with the actual colors from the beginning. Of course, both methods have their pros and cons. I recommend that if you haven't tried this one, just give it a go and see if you like painting and colorizing this way or not. Alright, I want to add a little bit more to this painting, again with the help of gradient maps. I want to create a colored glow effect in the middle of the shadow on the back of the snow leopard, just to give this painting a bit more color. Now I could just make a regular layer and paint on it with the highlight color I want, but let's say I want to have more than just one color. For example, I wanted to go from a faint purple to a marine blue at the mid-range and a bright light blue close to actual white at the highlights. I would need to switch colors constantly to achieve that sort of color variety. Or we use a gradient map and it takes care of that for us. We just need to paint with white at low opacity or brush density and we automatically get the colors we want. Here's how you set it up. Make a regular layer, fill it up with black and set it to screen. The screen blending mode ignores black and brightens layers below it if you have something brighter than black on it. Then make another layer and clip it to the screen layer. This will be the layer we paint on. You could also directly paint on the screen layer, so this is optional. Or you could clip more than one normal layer to the screen layer. It is up to you. And now here comes the gradient map. It also has to be clipped to the screen layer. And once again, I already have a preset ready. One important thing for the gradient is that at the left you have to have black. Otherwise the black of the screen layer would get changed, and we don't want that to happen. The other colors are the ones I've been talking about, going from purple to light blue. Alright, now all the layers are set up. Time to choose your brush and paint the wave with white, or some kind of gray. Make sure that the brush is not too opaque, otherwise you would just get one color out of it. Now, as you can see, as I add more white, therefore creating brighter and brighter grays, more colors on the right side of the gradient map come out. And that's basically it. Use whatever tools you want and create your glow effects. Airbrushes, textured brushes, smudge tools, you name it. You don't have to think about the colors anymore at all, just the brightness. Now, finishing this would take too long, so let me show you how my prepared version looks like. There we go. Combined with the eye color, it looks pretty neat in my opinion. Just out of curiosity, let's see how it looks like without the gradient map and the screen layer set as normal. There you can see all of those grays that were replaced with the colors of the gradient map. You can of course use other colors too. For example, it works very well with this fiery looking glow, going from a dark red to a bright yellow. For this particular painting, it looks out of place, almost as if the snow leopard is burning. But for other kinds of paintings, this can look really cool. As a matter of fact, you aren't limited to painting on top of another painting. You can use gradient maps to paint things from scratch without having to switch colors. You could paint flames, for example, with that fiery gradient. I will show you another example though, one that I personally am more familiar with. Let's paint some happy clouds. At first we need our color palette. You can get it directly from a photo. Simply have a picture open and pick out the colors directly from it. At first the darkest and brightest colors, and then two colors that are close to the darkest and brightest spots. This gives us a gradient from a somewhat dark blue to an unsaturated purple all the way to a bright orange. I also chose to add an even brighter yellow. Clip that gradient map to a normal empty layer. Let me also quickly make a sky background with the normal gradient tool. The blue sky preset will do. And now choose both white and black as your primary and secondary colors. At first we paint in the general shape with black. Use a solid opaque brush for that purpose. You can see that only the blue color that we picked out before is showing up. Then give the edges more shape. And afterwards lock the transparent pixels so that we only paint on the already painted areas. Now switch to the white color and use a soft brush. I use some of the free cloud brushes that you can find in the Clip Studio assets, and I simply give the clouds more fluffiness and shape. I only paint with white, but the more brightness I add, the more the brighter colors in the gradient map appear. Use the X key to quickly switch back and forth between white and black to switch between brightening and darkening. If you want to have a cap at how bright you get, you can also use a gray color instead of white. And like that you keep on working on the clouds, always switching between tools to give it more and more texture. Now I want to add some clouds in the back. I can put this layer into a folder and clip the gradient map to it. The gradient map gets applied to all the layers in the folder this way. For example, some faint cumulus clouds here and there in the back, and a contrail for improving the composition. All while only having white selected as color. Now what exactly is the benefit of doing it this way? Why not just paint it black and white at first and add the colors later, like before with the snow leopard? Well, this way you immediately see how it looks with the actual colors. You have a better idea of how the end result is going to look like while painting it. Just look at how the clouds look like without the gradient map. Not quite how you would normally paint them, but it works for us totally fine. So yeah, this is quite a convenient technique and can save you a lot of time if you get used to it. And it is not just limited to clouds. Let's talk about another way of how gradient maps can be used for digital art, or photos for that matter. So I have this drawing here that I finished a while ago. I want to improve it. I'm not quite satisfied with the colors and contrast. Gradient maps can be very useful for polishing up your colors when you are done drawing or painting. I want to bring those colors closer together to unify them and improve the general contrast. So first of all, let's work on the shadows. I make a gradient map layer and choose a blue instead of black. Now I move the white further to the left so that the blue only covers the shadowy parts of the picture. I can also adjust the mixing rate curve to get even better results. Then I click OK and change the blending mode to multiply. Now all the shadows have a blue hue to them. They also got darker since blue is a dark color, and the white gets ignored by the multiply blending mode. This might be a bit too extreme, so let's lower the opacity of the layer. And there we go, the shadows look much better now, in my opinion. Alright, how about we do the same for the brighter parts? This time I plan on making it a screen layer, so the black color will be ignored. However, I still keep the white color and simply add yellow to the left of it. I do that because the sun itself is supposed to appear white, not yellow. Then again, I move the black closer and adjust the curve until only the bright parts get covered. And now change the layer to screen. It is basically the opposite of multiply, making pixels brighter. We can do this for the mid-range colors too. This time I have white on both ends and a color right in the middle. How about a cyan, to make this winter-themed picture even colder looking? The same process, now just for the mid-range colors. And the layer gets changed to multiply again. I lowered the opacity by a lot because I don't want to completely destroy the original colors. And you could do this for several mid-ranges until you are satisfied. Let's compare before and after. I gotta say, I like the new version much more. It has a better contrast and is better at conveying that wintry feeling. And of course you can create completely alternative colors and make the wildest stylized versions of your picture. This one, for example, just used the Sunset Gold preset. Or I made this gradient map which gives it kind of a horror house feeling. And of course you can use gradient maps to create the black and white version of your picture. I recommend adjusting the mixing rate curve on the left node so that you get a balanced contrast. See the difference with and without the curve? Without it, the background is way too bright, so the difference is quite significant. Now as for the last part of this video, let's do something very different. This is a photo of my cat Hoko. Isn't she beautiful? I want to make her even prettier looking by adding a flower on her head. Gradient maps can be very useful for photo manipulation too. And you don't necessarily need Photoshop in order to do that. You can also use an app like Clip Studio Paint for that purpose, even though it is primarily made for drawing. So I have this PNG of a flower that I found for free. I already sized it down and put it into position. Also, I painted in some drop shadows on a multiply layer so that it doesn't look too much out of place. Well, problem still is that the colors are not working with each other at all. You can clearly see that the flower has been edited in. First of all, let me quickly adjust the colors of the flower directly. You can see on the wall in the background that the white balance is very yellowish. So I added a fill layer, picked out the color from that wall, clipped it to the flower, and set its blending mode to color. The opacity also gets lowered a little bit. It needs more contrast, so I add this tone curve. And increase the saturation with this HSL layer. Looks better now, but we are still not quite there. I want the colors to be more unified, similar to the painting before. So I added a couple of gradient maps. Those are not clipped to any specific layers so that they are applied to all the layers below. The creation process was pretty much the same as with the previous example, so I don't need to go through all of this again. One is set to multiply and has this blue color again to bring the shadows closer together. For the midtones, I picked out the color of the flower directly and put it at the same tone range as the flower petals. That way the colors of the flower remain mostly unchanged, but the rest of the colors become more red. I want this particular gradient map to be subtle though, so it has a low opacity. And then one in screen blending mode to bring the brighter spots together. It also gives us more contrast. And there we go. Again, let's compare before and after. Surely looks much better now. Not quite perfect, but definitely better. I'm not a photo editor, so I don't know all that much about those techniques. Those are just some tricks I learned while I researched gradient maps. And there you go. I hope you can see now how useful gradient maps can be. I certainly do now. To be completely honest with you, before I started working on this video when Clip Studio announced this theme for their Tips of the Month contest, I actually never used gradient maps before, but I wish I did. I'm definitely going to use them in the future. So thank you Clip Studio for drawing my attention to them. May I give you a little request though, in case you're listening? One problem I have with the gradient maps in Clip Studio Paint is that the color settings window does not have a live preview function. You always need to click on OK to see how the change looks like on the canvas. It would be immensely helpful if that feature would be added. Not just for gradient maps, but also for other features like the fill layers. Alright then, that's it from me. I hope that this video was helpful to you. As always, if you have any sort of questions or constructive feedback, then leave a comment down below. Thank you a lot for watching, and see you next time.